The morning in the busy train station cafe felt like any other day to everyone except one small girl who kept looking around with worried eyes. The cafe lights were warm, the smell of fresh bread floated in the air, and people rushed in and out without noticing anything unusual. But for her, every second felt heavy, as if the world was moving too slowly for what she needed. She held a worn backpack close to her chest, almost hugging it, as if it carried the only hope she had left. She stood near the counter where the workers were too busy to look at her properly. She kept trying to ask someone for help, but her voice was soft and tired. When one of the workers finally turned toward her, she quietly asked if anyone here could play the piano. The worker blinked and gave a confused smile as if thinking she was joking or asking something strange. The girl asked again, a little louder this time. "Can you play the piano? It's very urgent." Her words made a few customers nearby look at her, and some of them let out short laughs. Not in a cruel way, but because they didn't understand the seriousness in her voice. They thought she was being dramatic or trying to play some childish game, but she wasn't. Her small hands shook as she held her backpack even tighter. Near the window sat a well-dressed man with a tired face, sipping his coffee while checking his watch again and again. His day had already been packed with meetings, and another one had just been delayed. He had no interest in anything happening around him until he heard the girl's soft but desperate voice. Something about the way she said the word urgent made him look up. He watched her for a moment. She was tiny, maybe 8 or 9 years old, with a worried expression that did not belong on a child's face. Her shoes looked a bit worn, and her hair was messy, as if she had been moving around for hours. She didn't look like someone who would wander around asking strange questions for fun. There was something real in her eyes, something that made him pay attention. The worker she had asked shook his head and told her there was no piano here. And even if there was, no one had time to play anything. The girl swallowed hard and looked down, but she didn't give up. She turned to the next person, a woman waiting with a suitcase, and asked her the same question. The woman gave a kind smile but shook her head. The man by the window kept watching. He didn't know why he felt like he had to keep listening. Maybe it was because he had spent years hiding from anything emotional. Maybe it was because he had been trying to forget things from his own life that still hurt. Or maybe it was simply because the girl looked like she was holding herself together by a thread. She approached another table and asked again, "Can you play the piano? Please, it's really urgent." Her voice cracked a little, and she looked like she was fighting tears. The man could see her trying so hard not to break down. He felt something pull inside him, a feeling he hadn't let himself have in a long time. He didn't get up at first. He told himself it wasn't his business. He had a reputation of keeping distance from problems that weren't part of his work. But the sight of the girl standing in the middle of the cafe, while people around her ignored her, made something shift in him. Customers kept moving around her like she was invisible. Some listened for a moment, then shrugged and went back to their own world. She seemed smaller with each rejection, but she didn't walk away. She moved slowly toward the exit, glancing around as if hoping anyone would understand what she needed. The man set his cup down. His chest felt heavy. He didn't know why he was reacting like this. Maybe it was the loneliness he carried. Maybe it was memories. Maybe it was the look in her eyes. Something inside him pushed him to stand up. He followed her out of the cafe without fully thinking it through. She was standing near the hallway entrance, her backpack still pressed tightly against her. She looked uncertain, and for a second she seemed lost. He took a slow step toward her and spoke gently so he wouldn't scare her. "Hey," he said. "Are you all right?" The girl looked up, startled. She didn't answer right away, as if she was trying to decide whether she could trust him. Her eyes were tired, red around the edges like she hadn't slept much. He knelt slightly so he could be closer to her height. "I heard you asking about a piano," he said. "Why do you need someone to play it so urgently?" She hesitated. Her small fingers clutched the zipper of her backpack. I need to play a song," she whispered. "Before noon? Someone has to hear it. If I don't play it, something bad might happen to my mom." The man felt his stomach tighten. Her quiet, shaky words carried a weight that didn't belong to a child. But he didn't want to frighten her or push her too fast. "Can you tell me what's going on?" he asked softly. The girl took a tiny breath, trying to hold herself together. My mom, she teaches piano. She's really good, but she got sick and can't work now. Someone said, if I play the piece she taught me, and if I play it well, they might help her get treatment. They said they would listen today, but I can't find any piano. I've been looking since early morning. Her voice was trembling, and she seemed like she had told this story many times already to people who didn't care. The man felt something hit inside him, something painful but familiar. He had spent years keeping emotions out of his life. He had built walls and he thought they were strong. But now one tiny girl with tired eyes and a shaking voice was breaking through them. He cleared his throat and asked gently, who's supposed to listen to your performance? She looked down. A person from a music foundation, they said. They would decide if they can help my mom after they hear me play. Her words came out in fragments, like each one was difficult to say. The man stared at her for a moment. This wasn't a fantasy or some childish imagination. This was real. She wasn't trying to get attention. She was trying to save her mother. In the piano room at the community center. He asked. It's locked today, she whispered. I didn't know. They said they were doing repairs. I don't have anywhere else to go. The hallway felt colder suddenly. People moved past them without noticing what was happening, but to him the moment felt still. He saw the fear in her eyes, the fear of time slipping away. What time do you have to play? He asked. Noon, she answered. And it's almost 11. The man checked his watch. She was right. Time was slipping fast. He had a meeting scheduled soon, one that most people in his position would consider very important. But the idea of walking away from this girl made his chest tighten painfully. He didn't know if he could live with himself if he left her standing here with no help. So he made a decision before he could talk himself out of it. Come with me, he said softly. Let's try to find a piano together. The girl blinked as if she didn't understand him at first. You'll help me? Yes, he said. I'll help you. Her eyes slowly filled with tears of relief, but she didn't cry. She simply nodded, clutching her backpack as if it were the last thing holding her upright. They walked together out of the station's hallway. She followed him closely, as if she was afraid he would change his mind. He kept glancing at her to make sure she was all right. Her steps were small, but determined. Outside, the city was loud with cars and people rushing somewhere. He tried to think of any nearby place that might have a piano. Hotels sometimes had them, but getting access would take time. Music stores existed, but they never allowed people to play freely. He thought of the cultural center a few blocks away, a small place, often used for events and rehearsals. He turned to her. Let's check the cultural hall. I think they might have a piano. She nodded again, trusting him completely now. They began walking quickly through the busy streets. The girl stayed close, occasionally looking up at him like she wanted to say something but didn't know how. Her breaths were short, like she had been running all day before meeting him as they walked. The man couldn't stop thinking about why he felt so strongly about helping her. Something about the way she spoke about her mother brought a heaviness to his heart. He had lived through loss before, and the ache stayed with him even after years passed. He hadn't talked about it to anyone, not even to himself. He had buried it under work schedules and responsibilities. But this little girl, this stranger was stirring emotions he had tried hard to forget. When they reached the cultural hall, the outside looked quiet and empty. The doors were closed, but he knew someone must be inside. He knocked firmly. After a long moment, an older caretaker opened the door. He looked surprised to see visitors. Is the hall open today? The man asked. The caretaker shook his head. Only for cleaning. No events. We're closed to the public. The girl's shoulders dropped and her fingers tightened around her backpack again. The man noticed immediately. We just need a piano for a short time, he said. It's very important. The caretaker looked unsure. I'm not supposed to let anyone use the hall today. The girl stepped forward, her voice faint. Please, sir, I really need to play. Just for a little while. The caretaker hesitated. He looked at her small, tired face, then at the man who stood behind her, calm but serious. After a moment, he sighed. All right, he said, but only for a few minutes. Hope lit up the girl's eyes for the first time. The caretaker led them inside. The hall was dim and smelled slightly of old furniture and polish. There was dust on some of the chairs and the stage was empty. But against the wall stood an upright piano, simple but intact. The girl looked at it as if it were the most important thing she had ever seen. The man watched her carefully. Her hands were shaking slightly, not from fear of the piano, but from everything she had gone through that morning. She set her backpack down and slowly unzipped it. Inside were old sheets of music, some slightly wrinkled, some torn at the edges. All clearly used many times. She placed the sheets gently on the stand, smoothing the edges with delicate fingers. Then she sat down on the piano bench. Her feet didn't fully reach the floor. The man stood nearby, feeling something he couldn't describe settling into his chest. The girl pressed one key softly, then another. The sound echoed across the empty hall. She took a deep breath, and he felt the moment stretch, like the world was holding still just for her. The hall was quiet, except for the soft echo of the piano keys the girl had tried. The man stood behind her, unsure if he should sit down or keep watching. He didn't want to make her nervous, so he stayed still and let her take her time. The weight of what she carried was clear in every small movement she made. Her shoulders rose and fell shakily as she prepared herself. She stared at the sheet music with wide eyes, as if trying to gather all the strength she had left. The papers were old and wrinkled, but she handled them with care, smoothing each corner like it was priceless. The notes weren't just markings on paper to her, they were her mother's voice, her mother's lessons, and everything she held close. She placed both hands on the keys, took a deep breath, and closed her eyes. The man watched her chest rise slowly and then fall. He could almost hear the thoughts running through her mind: fear, pressure, hope, and love. When she finally pressed the first few notes of the melody, the sound was shaky but gentle. She paused, took another breath, then tried again. This time, the notes blended better, creating a small echo that floated softly through the hall. He didn't know the piece she was playing, but he could tell it meant something deep to her. She played with trembling fingers, sometimes stopping to steady her breathing. But each time she lifted her hands, she placed them back with determination. Minutes passed, and the melody grew a little stronger. She wasn't playing loudly, only enough to feel the keys and remind herself of what her mother had taught her. But even the quiet notes felt emotional, as if the piano itself understood what she was going through. The man stepped closer, wanting to encourage her but also not wanting to disturb her practice. He could see her shoulders shaking and knew she was holding back tears, focusing hard on not letting her emotions break her concentration. After a few more minutes, she lifted her hands and let them rest on her lap. She looked down, breathing heavily. "Are you okay?" the man asked softly. She nodded at first, then shook her head. "I'm scared," she whispered. He knelt beside her again, careful not to crowd her. "You're doing really well," he said gently. "You just started warming up. It's normal to feel nervous." She looked up at him with wide, uncertain eyes. "What if I can't play it right when they come? What if they don't help my mom?" Her voice cracked again, and she wiped her cheek quickly, trying not to cry. He felt his chest tighten. He hated seeing fear in her eyes. It reminded him too much of moments from his own past. Moments he wished he could go back and change. "We'll get through this," he said carefully. "You don't have to do it alone anymore." She clutched the side of the bench as if she didn't know what else to hold on to. Her small fingers left faint marks on the wood. "I've been trying all morning," she whispered. "Every place I went to was closed, or they told me to come back later. But later is too late." He nodded slowly. "No. We'll make sure you're ready before noon. I promise." Her eyes softened a little. She took a breath, then turned back to the keys. "Can I try again?" she asked quietly. "Of course," he said. She straightened her back and lifted her hands again. The second time she started playing, the notes were clearer. She still made small mistakes, but she didn't stop as quickly. She let the melody move forward, even when her fingers slipped. Every moment made her a little more confident. The man walked a few steps away and sat in one of the chairs, listening quietly. The sound of the piano felt strangely calming to him. It reminded him of moments long past, moments he had closed the door on. He could almost hear a faint memory playing alongside the girl's music. Something faint but familiar. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting himself feel the music. He didn't want to think about the memories it stirred, but they came anyway. The soft sound of piano keys, a gentle voice telling him to listen. Laughter in a small room filled with sunlight. He took a deep breath and let the memory fade. This wasn't about him. This was about the girl. About her mother. About a moment that could change their lives. The girl finished the piece and let her hands fall. She looked down at her lap, her face thoughtful. "I don't know if this is good enough," she said softly. He stood and walked toward her again. "You're putting your heart into it. That matters more than perfection. People can hear when something is played with feeling." She hesitated, as if she wanted to believe him, but couldn't fully trust her own ability. "My mom used to say that too," she whispered. "She said music can speak even when words can't." He felt a lump in his throat. "Your mom sounds like someone very wise." "She is," the girl said, tightening her grip on the edge of the piano bench. "She always tells me to keep trying, even when things are hard. She said if I keep practicing, one day I'll play better than her." She gave a small smile at the thought, but it faded quickly. "But if I don't play this piece today, she might not. She might not get better." Her voice broke, and she covered her mouth, pressing her fingers hard against her lips. He reached out gently. "Hey, it's okay. You're not alone. We'll make sure you get to play, and you'll do it beautifully," she nodded, wiping her face quickly. Then she took another breath and began practicing again. The caretaker had been listening from a distance. At first he had frowned, unsure whether letting them inside was a good idea. But as he listened to the girl's playing and saw the emotion in her movements, his expression softened. "You two can stay longer if needed," the caretaker said quietly. "Just lock the door behind you when you leave." The man turned gratefully. "Thank you. We appreciate it." The caretaker nodded and walked toward another room. Leaving them in the quiet hall, the girl practiced for several minutes straight, then stopped, breathing heavily. Her hands were shaking from trying so hard. The man noticed and went to get her a glass of water from the nearby table. She took it with both hands and drank slowly. When she finished, she let out a shaky breath and looked up. "Do you think the person from the foundation will come?" she asked. "They'll come," he said confidently. "And even if they don't, I'll find a way to contact them. You don't have to worry about that part." She lowered the glass slowly. "Thank you." Her words were small but sincere. A few minutes passed before she placed her hands back on the keys again. She played the same melody again and again, each time a little stronger. Her mistakes became smaller, her pauses shorter. She was fighting her fear with every note. But the man noticed something else. She kept glancing at the entrance of the hall. Each time she played a few measures, her eyes flicked toward the door, as if she were waiting for someone important. He approached her slowly. "Are you waiting for the foundation person to walk in?" She hesitated, then nodded. "They said they would meet me at the community center. But when I found it locked, I thought, maybe they won't find me." He rested a hand lightly on the piano's edge. "They'll come here. And if they don't, I'll go find them myself." "But what if they leave before you get there?" she asked, fear tightening her voice. He looked at her with calm confidence. "Then I'll make sure they understand how important this is. You're not going to lose this chance." She stared at him for a moment, long enough for him to see how much she wanted to believe him. Then she nodded again and went back to playing. Time passed slowly, the hall filled with the growing strength of her music, rising and falling like waves. She kept playing even when her arms were tired and her fingers felt stiff. She didn't complain. She didn't ask for a break. She simply kept going. The man watched her with quiet admiration. Her strength wasn't loud or dramatic. It was soft, steady, and determined, something he rarely saw in adults, let alone children. He checked his watch. It was a few minutes before noon. "We should stop for a moment," he said gently. "Take a breath before he arrives." She looked up nervously. "What if I forget everything?" "You won't," he said. "Your mother taught you well. And you've practiced more in the last hour than most people do in a week. She swallowed hard. I just want her to get better. He felt that familiar tightness in his chest. I know. And she will. They both looked toward the entrance of the hall. A few seconds later, footsteps echoed in the hallway. The girl stiffened on the bench. Her small hands gripped the edge so tightly that her knuckles turned pale. Her breathing grew quick. The man placed a calming hand on her shoulder. It's okay, he whispered. The door creaked open slowly. A figure stepped inside. The girl's eyes widened, and in that moment, everything they had been preparing for was finally here. The person who entered the hall was not tall or intimidating. In fact, he looked surprisingly ordinary, a middle-aged man holding a slim folder under his arm, wearing simple glasses and carrying a calm expression. But to the little girl sitting at the piano bench, he might as well have been the most important person in the world. The girl's breath caught in her throat. She sat up straight, her hands frozen just above the keys. Her heart thumped so loud she thought the man beside her might hear it. The man with glasses looked around the empty hall until his eyes fell on her. He took a slow step forward. Are you the one who contacted the foundation? He asked in a gentle voice. The girl nodded quickly. Yes, I'm the one. Her voice was so soft it was almost swallowed by the stillness of the hall. The man from the cafe stood close behind her, not wanting to interfere, but also not willing to let her face this moment alone. The evaluator, because that was clearly who he was. Adjusted his glasses and looked at the piano. You're here early, he said. I went to the community center, but it was closed. They said a child was looking for a piano. I followed the direction they gave me. The girl swallowed hard. I didn't know it would be locked today, she explained quickly. I tried to find another piano. I didn't want to miss you. The evaluator nodded with understanding. He didn't seem annoyed. If anything, he looked impressed by her effort. Well, he said gently, you're here now. That's what matters. The little girl clasped her trembling hands together. Can I play for you now? She asked, her voice unsteady. Yes, the evaluator said with a kind smile. Whenever you're ready. But she wasn't ready. Not yet. Her heart was racing, her palms sweaty, and her mind filled with fear. She looked down at her sheet music, and the notes suddenly felt unfamiliar. For a moment, she forgot everything she had practiced. The man standing behind her noticed the fear in her eyes immediately. He stepped closer, keeping his voice low so only she could hear. Take your time, he whispered. You're not alone. I'm right here. She looked up at him, and something in her eyes softened. She took a deep breath. Then she placed her fingers on the keys again. The evaluator took a seat in the front row, placing his folder on his lap. His calm posture somehow made the moment even heavier. The girl closed her eyes for a second. She thought of her mother lying weak at home, yet still managing to smile whenever her daughter practiced. She remembered the last thing her mother said before she left that morning. Play with your heart, not just your hands. The girl straightened her back, then she began. The first notes came out soft, almost too soft, but they were steady. She pressed each key with care, as if she were touching memories. She followed the melody her mother had taught her, letting it flow forward even when her hands trembled. The evaluator listened closely, leaning forward a little. His eyes followed her fingers as they danced across the keys. The man standing behind her felt every note in his chest. He didn't know much about music, but he knew emotion. And the girl's playing carried so much of it that he felt it like a pull inside him. As she continued, her confidence slowly grew. Her hands stopped shaking. The melody became clearer, stronger, and more alive. But halfway through, something happened. A single wrong note, then another. Her rhythm faltered, and she froze. Her fingers hovered above the keys, stiff and tense. She stared at the piano as if it had suddenly become unfamiliar. The evaluator's expression stayed calm. But she saw it. She saw the small shift in his eyes, the slight tilt of his head. She panicked. I'm sorry, she whispered, pulling her hands back. I'm sorry I messed up. Can I start again? Her voice broke, and tears began to gather in her eyes. The evaluator opened his mouth to respond. But the man beside her stepped forward before he could. Hey, the man said gently, kneeling next to her. Look at me. She slowly turned her head. "You're doing amazing," he told her. "Everyone makes mistakes, even the best players. Don't let one moment stop you." "But he's judging me," she whispered, her voice trembling. "He's listening," the man corrected softly. "And he needs to hear your heart, not perfection." The evaluator, hearing this, nodded quietly. "He's right," he added. "We're not looking for flawless players. We're looking for passion, effort, and sincerity." The girl took another breath, shakier this time. "But if I play badly, will you still help my mom?" The evaluator's face softened deeply. "Play for her. Don't think about anything else." The girl nodded slowly. She placed her fingers back on the keys. This time she didn't rush. She didn't think about mistakes. She just played. The music that followed was not perfect, but it was pure. Every note carried her emotion, rising and falling like her own heartbeat. The hall filled with a gentle warmth, the kind that only honest music could bring. The man behind her felt something tighten in his throat. He wasn't someone who cried easily. In fact, he had spent years avoiding moments that could push him toward tears. But something about this girl's trembling strength, about her courage to continue even when she felt terrified, broke something open inside him. He blinked several times, trying to push the feeling down, but he couldn't. A tear slipped down his cheek quietly. He wiped it quickly, hoping no one noticed. The evaluator did notice, but he said nothing. When the girl finished, her hands stayed hovering over the keys. She didn't move. She didn't even breathe for a moment. The hall was silent. Then the evaluator stood up slowly. He approached her with measured steps, his expression thoughtful and gentle. "You have something rare," he said quietly. "You play with feeling. That's something that can't be taught." The girl stared at him, hope flickering in her eyes. "Does that mean you'll help my mom?" The evaluator took a slow breath and nodded. "Yes, I'll recommend full support for her treatment. We'll handle all the arrangements." The girl's breath caught. Then, without warning, she burst into tears, soft, shaking tears that came from relief, exhaustion, and overwhelming fear finally melting away. The man behind her placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, steadying her. She leaned into him without thinking, overwhelmed by the moment. "Thank you," she whispered through tears. "Thank you so much." The evaluator smiled kindly. "You're very brave, and your mother should be proud." The girl took another shaky breath, wiping her face with the back of her hand. Can I tell her now?" "Of course," the evaluator said. "I'll call the foundation office as soon as I leave. They'll start the process today." The girl nodded quickly, clutching her backpack again. The evaluator looked at the man standing beside her. "Thank you for helping her," he said softly. "Most people would have walked past." The man shook his head. "She found me," he replied quietly. The evaluator left the hall, closing the door behind him. The girl stood up slowly. Her hands were still shaking, but her face was brighter, now hopeful, lighter. She turned to the man. "Thank you for staying with me," she said. "I don't think I could have done it alone." He gave her a small smile. "You did all the hard work." She hugged her backpack closer. Can you walk with me home? I want to tell my mom right away." The man hesitated only for a second. He had meetings, responsibilities, people waiting for him. But none of that mattered anymore, of course, he said. They walked out of the hall together. The sun had shifted in the sky, casting long shadows across the quiet street. The girl walked with quicker steps now, almost running at times. The man had to keep up. She led him through narrow streets, down a quieter neighborhood filled with aging buildings and small shops. She didn't talk much on the way. She was too focused on getting home as fast as possible. They reached a small building with peeling paint and a narrow staircase. She hurried up without waiting. The man followed her, hearing her breathless excitement. At the top floor, she unlocked a door and ran inside. "Mom! Mom, I'm back!" she called. He stepped into the small apartment behind her. The air inside was warm, filled with the faint smell of medicine. A woman lay on a thin bed near the window, weak, but smiling as her daughter rushed to her side. The man watched quietly from the doorway as the girl clasped her mother's hand. "Mom," she said breathlessly, tears forming in her eyes again, but this time they were tears of relief. "They're going to help you." "I did it. I really did it." Her mother brushed her cheek with a trembling hand. "You did more than I could ever ask for," she whispered. And the man standing at the door felt something inside him shift against something deeper than before. He didn't know how much this moment was going to change his life, but it already had. The man did not know why he felt such a heavy weight in his chest as he followed the little girl into the hospital. The sound of her music was still echoing in his mind, soft yet powerful, as if each note had pushed something loose inside him. He had tried for years to bury certain parts of his life, but hearing her play made all those sealed memories rise again like dust in sunlight. He watched her walking a few steps ahead, holding the worn music sheets tightly against her chest. The hospital hallway smelled faintly of antiseptic and warm food from the cafeteria, a strange mix that always reminded him of long nights he once spent sitting beside someone he loved. He pushed the thought away and kept walking. The girl slowed down and glanced back at him. Her eyes still carried traces of fear. There was something else, too, a small spark of hope she was trying so hard to protect. She led him toward a room at the end of the corridor, where a doctor stood outside looking over some papers. The girl rushed forward. "Is she okay? Did anything happen?" Her voice trembled, but she tried to keep it steady. The doctor turned with a gentle look. "She's stable, but she's still very weak. Any stress could slow her recovery. For now, she needs rest and proper treatment." He paused and looked at the man standing behind her. "Are you with her?" The girl opened her mouth to speak, but the man stepped forward. "I'm helping her." It was the simplest way to say it, even if he wasn't sure why he felt responsible. "Whatever treatment her mother needs, start it." "Right away?" The doctor hesitated. "The cost, I'll take care of it," the man said firmly. The girl turned to him, eyes wide. "But that's too much. I don't know how to repay." "You don't need to repay anything." His voice softened, surprising even himself. "Just focus on your mother." Before she could say more, the doctor nodded and walked away to arrange the paperwork. The girl stood there frozen for a moment. Her hands held the music sheet so tightly that the edges bent inward. When she finally looked up, her eyes shimmered. "Why are you helping us?" she whispered. The man took a slow breath. He wasn't sure if he should answer. He had spent years avoiding this question from others, and especially from himself. But something about this child, her courage, her fear, her music made it impossible to keep pretending. They walked to a pair of chairs in the hallway. The girl sat down first. He lowered himself into the seat beside her and stared at the opposite wall where a colorful mural of flowers tried to make the place feel cheerful. "I had a daughter," he began. The words felt like stones rolling out of a place he had locked tight. She loved music. Not just loved, she lived in it. Every morning, every night, she would play something, even on days she didn't feel well. He paused, swallowing the ache rising in his throat. "But I was always too busy. Too focused on work, meetings, numbers, deadlines. I always told her, play later. I need to finish this first." He rubbed his hands together slowly. Later never came. The girl listened quietly. She didn't interrupt or rush him. She simply held her music sheets closer, as if sensing the weight of what he was saying. "When she passed away," he continued, "I didn't even remember the last song she played for me. I've spent years trying to fill the silence she left behind. But nothing ever worked." His voice softened. "Until today. When I heard you play, it felt like someone opened a window in a room that had been locked for too long." The girl's lips parted slightly. She didn't smile, but her expression warmed with understanding. "I'm sorry," she murmured. He shook his head. "You don't need to be sorry. You just reminded me of something I forgot I once loved." For a moment, they sat together in silence, letting the soft beeping of distant machines fill the space. Then the girl spoke again. "My mom always said music can reach people even when words can't. She said it can touch the part of the heart that hides. Maybe that's what happened to you. He looked at her, surprised by her gentle wisdom. Maybe, he said quietly. A nurse approached them and smiled kindly. You can go in now. She's resting, but she'll be happy to have you close. The girl stood up quickly. Her steps were small, but full of determination. She looked back at the man. Will you come inside too? Just stand with me. He hesitated. Walking into that room wasn't just about her mother. It meant facing memories he had avoided for years. But when he looked at the girl's hopeful eyes, the decision made itself. Yes, he said softly. I'll come. They entered the room together. Her mother lay on the bed, pale and fragile, breathing steadily with the help of soft hospital machinery. Her hands rested over the thin blanket, and her hair fell loosely against the pillow. The girl walked to her side, gently touching her mother's hand. I played today, she whispered. Just like you taught me. And he listened. She glanced back at the man. Everyone listened. Her mother didn't open her eyes, but one of her fingers twitched slightly, a small movement, but enough to make the girl gasp softly. She hears you, the man murmured, feeling a tightness in his chest. The girl reached for her backpack, pulled out the music sheets and looked at him shyly. Do you think it's okay? If I play a little again, not loud, just enough for her to feel it. He nodded. I think she'd like that. There was no piano in the room, only a small keyboard the hospital kept for therapy sessions. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. The girl pulled it closer, plugged it in, and sat on a low stool. She took a deep breath and let her fingers rest on the keys. Then she began to play, softly, tenderly. The melody was the same piece she had performed earlier, but now it carried something even deeper. Each note felt like a message, a memory, a promise. The man stood near the door, watching the scene quietly. The girl's music filled the room like a warm glow, and as he listened, he felt something inside him shift, not in a sudden burst, but gently, like a door slowly opening. Halfway through the piece, the mother's hand moved again, this time more clearly. Her fingers curled slightly, as if reaching toward the sound. The girl's breath caught, but she kept playing, afraid to stop. Her eyes glistened with tears that clung to her lashes. When the song ended, she looked at her mother with trembling hope. Mama, can you hear me? For a moment, nothing happened. And then, slowly, the woman's eyes fluttered open. The girl gasped, pressing both hands to her mouth as she stepped closer. Mama, the woman blinked, confused but awake. Her gaze moved around the room until it landed on her daughter. A weak smile formed. I heard your song, she whispered. The girl collapsed gently onto the bed, hugging her mother carefully. Tears fell freely down her cheeks. The man turned slightly away, blinking back the sting in his own eyes. He didn't want to intrude on their moment. He felt his heart soften in a way he hadn't expected. The woman looked past her daughter toward him. Her voice was quiet but full of gratitude. Thank you for helping her. He shook his head lightly. She's the one who helped me. The room felt peaceful, filled with the faint hum of machines and the warmth of reunion. The girl held her mother's hand tightly, as if afraid to let go. The man stood quietly nearby, unsure of what came next, but certain he didn't want to walk away from these two fragile but strong lives. After a while, a nurse entered to check the mother's vitals. The girl stepped back, but kept holding her mother's hand. The man moved to the corner, watching without interfering. The nurse smiled reassuringly. She's doing better than expected. With the right treatment and rest, she'll get much stronger. The girl let out a shaky breath of relief. The nurse turned to the man. We've started the treatment you approved. The paperwork is being processed. He nodded. Thank you. When the nurse left, the girl looked at him again. You really didn't have to do all this. I know, he said softly. But I wanted to. She tilted her head slightly. Why? He smiled faintly. Maybe I needed to do something good today. Something real. The girl thought about that for a moment, then nodded as if she understood perfectly. The mother, still weak but awake, watched them with calm gratitude. You brought her back to me, she murmured. That means more than words can say. He swallowed gently. She brought herself back. I just opened a door. The days that followed felt warmer, even though winter still pressed its cold breath against the city. Inside the hospital room, the mood was softer now, filled with the quiet relief of a small family holding on to each other. The girl stayed close to her mother, reading to her, talking to her, sometimes humming parts of the melody she had played. It became a gentle routine the woman looked forward to each time she opened her eyes. The man visited often, though never in a way that felt forced. He would stop by after his meetings or before starting his day, bringing small items the nurses said would help: warm socks, soft blankets, a better pillow, even a tiny speaker so the girl could play recordings of piano music. When she wasn't practicing, he didn't say much about why he kept coming. But each time he walked into the room, something in the girl relaxed. She had grown used to depending only on herself. Trusting someone new felt strange but comforting. One morning, after several days of steady recovery, the doctor stepped into the room with a bright expression. "Great progress," he said, flipping through the charts. "Her condition is improving faster than we expected. With continued treatment and proper rest, she'll be able to go home soon." The girl's face lit up instantly. She rushed to her mother's bedside. "Did you hear that? We can go home." Her voice bubbled with joy. Her mother smiled, weaker than before, but still warm. "Yes, dear. But don't get too excited yet. We still have some days left here." The man, who had been standing near the window, allowed himself a small smile as well. "This is good news. Really good news." The girl nodded, unable to stop smiling. She turned to him. "It's because of you." He shook his head gently. "It's because of both of you. You didn't give up." The girl walked over to the small keyboard on the table. "Can I play something? Just for a minute?" she asked the doctor. The doctor smiled. "As long as it's gentle and she enjoys it, go ahead." The girl sat down and began to play a soft, slow tune that she made up on the spot. It wasn't as polished as the piece she had performed earlier, but it was filled with happiness and gratitude. The man leaned back slightly, letting the notes settle into him. He didn't speak, but inside, he felt a quiet shift, a sense that maybe he hadn't lost everything. Maybe some melodies could return. After the song, the doctor left, and the girl helped her mother drink water. The man stayed a while longer, listening to their small conversations. Eventually, he stepped closer. "I want to ask you both something," he said. The girl looked up curiously. Her mother lifted her gaze too, though she seemed a bit tired. He took a slow breath. "Once she's fully recovered, I'd like to help you find a better place to live. A safer place. And..." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "If she wants, I'd like to help your daughter get proper music lessons. Real lessons. With good teachers." The girl stared at him, stunned. "For me? Yes," he said with a small nod. "You have something special, and someone like you deserves a chance to grow it." Her mother's eyes softened, though she looked unsure. "That's a generous offer, but we don't want to burden you. You've already done so much." "This isn't a burden," he said quietly. "It's something I want to do. Not out of guilt, not out of pity, but because I believe she has a future worth supporting. And because..." He hesitated again. "Because helping her helps me too." The room fell quiet for a moment. Then the mother nodded slowly. "If she wants it, I won't stop her." The girl took a small step forward. "I want it," she said softly. "I really want it." Her voice trembled with excitement she tried to hide. "I want to learn everything. I want to play better. I want to make Mom proud." The man smiled, a soft, genuine smile that warmed his face. "Then that's what we'll do." Over the next week, her mother grew stronger. She could sit up longer, talk more, and even laugh a little. The girl stayed by her side almost constantly, practicing on the keyboard when her mother rested. The man joined them each day, but he never overstayed. He let their small family moments remain their own. Sometimes he simply sat in the corner of the room with a notebook, quietly going through his work while listening to the girl practice. One afternoon, the girl asked him, "Do you like being here?" He looked up from his notebook. "Yes, I do." "Why?" she asked. He thought for a moment. Because it feels real. Not like the things I'm used to. She tilted her head. What do you mean? In my world, everyone talks, but very few listen. Everyone tries to look strong, but almost no one shows what they're feeling. He closed his notebook. Here, things aren't perfect, but they're honest. And that means a lot. The girl nodded, though she wasn't sure she fully understood, but she liked the answer. Finally, the day came when the doctor walked in and said, "You can go home tomorrow." The girl clapped her hands and hugged her mother tightly. Tomorrow? We're going home tomorrow. Her mother laughed softly and stroked her daughter's hair. Yes, dear, tomorrow. The man looked relieved too. I'll make sure everything is arranged for you, he said. Transportation, medication, and whatever else you need. The girl's eyes sparkled. Will you come too? When we leave? He hesitated, not because he didn't want to, but because he wondered if he should. After a breath, he nodded. If you want me to. I do, she said without a second thought. Her mother smiled gently. You've become part of this journey. It would be nice to have you there. He bowed his head slightly, touched by her words. The next day, the girl helped her mother pack their few belongings into a simple bag. The man arrived with a comfortable jacket for the mother and a new backpack for the girl. When the girl saw the backpack, her face lit up. For me? Yes, he said. So you can carry your music sheets safely, and maybe add more in the future. She hugged the backpack to her chest. Thank you. They left the hospital together, the mother in a wheelchair pushed gently by a nurse. The girl walked beside her, holding her mother's hand. The man walked on the other side, making sure they had everything. Outside, the air felt fresh. A small gust of wind brushed past them, lifting the girl's hair. She smiled up at the sky. Feels like a new start, she said. Her mother nodded. Yes, a new start. The man looked at both of them, his heart warming in a way he hadn't felt in years. The car ride to their home was quiet but peaceful. The girl kept glancing out the window, humming a tune under her breath. Her mother sat comfortably in the back seat, resting but awake. When they reached the small apartment building, the man helped them inside. The place was clean but old, with uneven floors and walls that carried years of wear. The girl looked around the familiar space, then turned to the man. Will we still get to move later? When Mom is better? He nodded. Yes. We'll find a better home for both of you. Her mother smiled gratefully. We'll appreciate any help. But one step at a time, of course, he said. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the apartment in soft, golden light, the girl pulled out her new backpack and took out her music sheets. She sat down at the tiny keyboard they had used for years. Can I play one more song? She asked. Her mother nodded. I'd love that. The man standing near the door paused. I should give you some rest. I'll come back tomorrow. The girl shook her head quickly. No, stay. Just for this song. He hesitated, then nodded. All right, she placed her fingers on the keys. The melody that flowed out was gentle, soft, and filled with emotion. It wasn't perfect. A few notes wavered. But it was real. The man closed his eyes for a moment, letting the music wash over him. He felt something inside him loosen once more, not painfully this time, but with peace. When the song ended, the room stayed quiet for a few seconds. Then the girl looked up. One day, I want to play on a real stage, for lots of people, and I want you and Mom to be there. Her mother reached out and cupped her daughter's cheek. You will? The man smiled softly, and we'll be right in the front row. The girl's eyes shone, reflecting the soft lamplight. Promise? She asked. Promise, he said. That night marked the beginning of something new, not just for the girl and her mother, but for the man who had walked into their lives by accident and found a piece of himself he thought was lost forever. And so, with a small keyboard, a warm apartment, and a melody that carried hope, their new journey truly began.